here we have crisis happening, and then we have consolidation, where okay, now they're forced to like change their understanding of what imamat is, what the role of the imam is, what the imam is supposed to do. So the basic understanding is that we've had a gradual evolution of the idea of imamat. So they'll focus on the book and they'll go like literally like line by line and say, okay, Modarressi said this was his evidence, okay, does it prove what his point is saying, is his evidence correct? And so from there they'll try and like show flaws, research flaws within the book. It's interesting because the same argument has been brought by some other people before as well. So in the famous case of Abdul Aziz Sachedina, his defense was that I just wrote it for Western academia, like you're there, this is what you have to write.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers, and welcome to another special episode of Faraj podcast. Now, in our early episodes, we had mentioned that we wanted to do a sort of collaboration with the organization known as Kalima Online, where we were sort of wanted to have more intellectual discussions, and we were looking at different books. So today, we want to look at a very something that's really plagued the Shia community at the moment, and that is the issue of the ulama abrar theory, and something that came from the book we want to review today. And obviously I'll let my guest introduce that, but I'd rather start off by introducing my guest itself. I have with me Brother Habib Mazahir, who has graduated from UCL, University College of London. And at the same time, he was also studying in Sheikh Shumali's Hawza, the Hawza of England. He did his bachelor's there, and then after that, he's doing his master's in philosophy in the School of Islamic and Occidental Studies. And inshallah, today he's going to talk about the book Crisis Consolidation by Sayyid Hossein Modarressi. So, Brother Habib, thank you so much for your time and welcome to our podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Now, the thing of imama, because this is something that I've also sort of tried to look into and do a bit of research. Something that we as Shias have taken as a given, that the 12 Imams are appointed from God. It's a big thing to say, but it's one of the central pillars of the Shia faith. The 12 Imams, unlike other sects, or apart from that, the Imams being infallible. And the other one, the knowledge of the Imams being from God, as we say in Kalam, ilm ladunni. It's different from you and me. We need to read books and think, and we can make errors, but we don't assume these things for the Imams. It's quite different. And then comes along Sayyid Hossein Modarressi, and he writes this book, and he sort of challenges these three aspects in particular. And it's something, and obviously, he was very famous in the Hawza, and then he went to America, because I sort of did a bit of reading about his life. And he's not just any random person. He is an established scholar, and from what I have done, his ijtihad is something that we've accepted. It's not under question. And then, he comes along in America, and he presents this book, and he challenges these notions. So it's good, alhamdulillah, we can sort of look at this book today. So the first question that I really want to sort of ask you, can you give us an overview of these ideas that he sort of talks about, this book, Crisis and Consolidation?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So the book Crisis and Consolidation is an interesting work, and the main idea that Modarressi tries to present in this book is that he says that Shiism as we know it today, the theology that we have today, it's come very far from what it originally was during the time of the Imams. And the book centers around this idea that the Ashab and even the Imams themselves would propagate about Imamat was a very simplified, basic tenet of Imamat. But throughout history, it has gone through some kind of like evolution. Especially after the death of each Imam. And that's why he calls the book Crisis and Consolidation. Crisis means like at the death of almost every Imam, there is a crisis in the sense that the community is confused that, okay, who is the next Imam? Or they have an expectation of who the Imam will be, and then they're told, no, the Imam is somewhere else. or they have some beliefs and they're told, no, that belief is wrong, for example. So here we have crisis happening, and then we have consolidation where, okay, now they're forced to like change their understanding of what imamat is, what the role of the imam is, what the imam is supposed to do. So the basic understanding is that we've had a gradual evolution of the idea of imamat. The basic idea is that the initial ashab and the companions of the imam would take these imams as scholars. They had a lot of knowledge, normal knowledge, and they would look up to them. Initially, they would just see them as political leaders, and this is before the sixth imam. So from the Imam Ali to the sixth imam, the idea was, okay, the imam is going to rise up and he's going to politically lead the community. That's it. Then after the sixth imam, again, now things start changing, and now you have something more being added. Okay, it's not about political leadership, it's a kind of religious leadership. He's the divinely ordained imam. He's got some ilm al-ghaib, he can do these karamat and these miracles, and he's ma'soom. And these are ideas that are being portrayed by the ghulat or the extremists. So they come in and they add these kind of things. And through history, what we can see is that the early companions didn't believe in this, but gradually, okay, they came to accept it. The hadith corpus that we had, for example, full of fabrications, and gradually, okay, things started coming into the Shi'i theology until what we have it is as today. So this is the main idea, is that we have this kind of evolution of Shi'i theology, of Shi'i thought. And it's not an evolution that, for example, the Imams are pushing. No, it's external factors. Either it's political situations, or it's like these sects such as the Waqifa or the Ghulat. They're adding things, you know, and the Shias are accepting it. And today what we have is a mixture of all of these kind of things.
I mean, the thing is that when I've looked at history, I see that, okay, Imam Ali, after the Prophet dies, right? Obviously, as Shias, we don't accept the first three caliphs. That's a different issue. However, so he's sort of censored in a way. And there are certain incidents where people have tried to assassinate him. Then when he becomes the caliph, his 4.5, 5 years of khilafah is filled with wars. You have Siffin, Nahirwan, Jamal, and it's filled with wars. So obviously, if I look at it from a rational way, most of his attention is there. And then obviously, you know, he has his family. Then you come to Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, right? Again, completely censored. Even if we look at our corpus, we don't have many narrations in comparison to 5th and 6th Imam. So many thousands, but, right? So because of this censorship, you know, I get this idea that these Imams are very limited. Yeah, sure, they might have, you know, their own companions. They would have converted people and brought people close to them. But what is sort of coming out to me, that these Imams did not have the opportunity to sort of spread the Islam that God wants to give you and me. And then when you come to, obviously, 4th Imam, similar problems. But then the 5th Imam, he's got this opportunity. And the same 6th Imam. So now because they've got this opportunity, people are ready to accept this, you know, their teaching. He can sort of give me the true religion. So if an Imam is giving me this, whether or not it's come earlier in time, the truth is still out there. So then, you know, even if the 5th Imam gives me, I wouldn't see that as an addition or an exaggeration. Right? Because we can argue the infallibility from the Quran, right? And obviously you can sort of dive into that. Even the idea of non-prophets, people who are not prophets, having knowledge directly from God and not obtained. The Quran mentions that in certain areas. So it doesn't look like an exaggeration. However, let's move on. You know, I want you to sort of touch more, since you've done more research on this. This particular book, can you sort of tell me that what impact has it had on, you know, different individuals, and, you know, maybe people would have tried to take incorrect advantage of it. So how about you sort of touch upon that?
So the book was originally written in English. I can probably like show the viewers. So this is the original book, Crisis and Consolidation. So this was written in 1993.
Okay.
So he wrote it first in English. 2 years after the English was written, there was an unofficial Farsi translation that happened.
Okay.
So because it was unofficial, there wasn't much response to it.
Yeah.
There were very few like critiques written against it, but because it was unofficial, it didn't spread much.
Okay.
But 15 years later, what you have is now the Farsi translation that came
Okay.
out, and it's called Maktab Dar Farayande Takamul. So title is slightly different to the English title, but
Yeah.
it tells you the whole idea of the book, that this school of thought that we have is in a way of progression or
Okay.
evolution.
Yeah.
So when the Farsi translation came out, that's when things got really heated. Because you had like different factions and different groups trying to take advantage of the ideas mentioned in the book.
Yeah.
So for example, there's an Iranian dissident who lives in America. His name is Akbar Ganji.
Okay.
I think there's got a Wikipedia page as well. He was just like a journalist, and now he's in America. So he's very vocal against the government, very vocal against Iran. He came to like one of the TV stations or radio stations, and he openly said that because he was critiquing the Iranian government, he's like, okay, I don't believe in this whole wilayat al-faqih or the Iranian government, because they seem to take their ideas, or they think they're representing the 12th Imam. But the problem is that this whole idea of the 12th Imam is a complete fabrication, and it's something that the Shias made up in a period of crisis or hayra. So he's saying that don't listen to me, look at this book, Crisis and Consolidation. So he mentions the book. He says, look, this book clearly proves that at that time, when supposedly the 12th Imam went into Ghaiba, the Shias were confused, like, oh, what happened to our Imam? That's when they came up with this whole idea, okay, there's a 12th Imam, he's the Mahdi, and he'll go Ghaiba. And so he said, look, the book proves that, okay, all of that is like fabrications. And if that's a fabrication, then anything you build on top of that, politically, theologically, all that goes.
Yeah.
So here was somebody who's not a scholar, he's just a journalist, but he was like referring to this book.
Okay.
Somebody else who referred to this book or based their ideas on this book is Professor Mohsen Kadivar.
Yes.
He's also in America, and he came up with this idea called ulama abrar, or very similar to what Modarressi was saying, where he was saying that, okay, the original companions of the Imams, they would only look at the Imams as pious scholars. Just the way that you look at very learned scholars we have today, we don't see them as like divinely appointed or have some special knowledge. So similarly, the companions would look at the Imams in the same way. So here again, he says like he relies heavily on the book Crisis and Consolidation. And in fact, when critiques were written against him as well, they would pair him with this book as well. And they say, okay, both of them were critiquing them together. And then like even like in the community, you have like people like, using this book and saying, okay, this book has like opened my eyes. Like I remember I was just like Googling what are people saying on like, things like Shia Chat or Goodreads. And they were like, oh, this is like an eye-opening book. And this shows you like the reality that we didn't know all this time. And it was really eye-opening for me. And so the general idea that people get when reading this book is that, there's some like hidden truth in here that we've been like duped into believing all these years. And now my eyes are open, like, no, Shiism is not what I currently believe. It's actually this. It's something very simple. And we've just been like fooled all this time. So yeah, these are the different factions that have like taken advantage of the book and built their arguments using the book.
Okay. So has there been any academic responses or any sort of rebuttals against it?
Yeah, so the thing is that when it was in English, like nobody cared about it, nothing was happening much. But as soon as the Farsi translation came out and now the scholarly world was made aware of it, there was a huge backlash and a lot of critiques were written. So recently I was doing some research with a friend about some of the ideas in the book. And we said, let's try and just make a list or a collection of works that have been written against the book. So all we were doing is just like finding any book, any work that's been written against it. And we found more than like 65 different works. That includes like books, dissertations, articles, blog posts, all academically critiquing the book. And it's interesting that because it's been such a while since it came out. I mean, you're looking at early 2000s when the Farsi came out, and still today, like responses are being written. So the last one we recently came out, like I think about a year ago. So till now, again, critiques are still being written. People are critiquing them in different ways. They have like different methods of critiquing it. So for example, if I can give you kinds of responses. So some of the responses will take the book and dissect each point in the book point by point. So they'll focus on the book and they'll go like literally like line by line and say, okay, Modarressi said this was his evidence. Okay, does it prove what his point is saying? Is his evidence correct? And so from there they'll try and like show flaws, research flaws within the book. So for example, they show, okay, look, there's like incorrect referencing in the book, cherry picking of narrations or incomplete quotations, or for example, they'll say, okay, he's brought one piece of evidence, but there's like 10 counter evidence that he's not engaged with. So a large section of works written is like trying to show like a faults within the book. Then there's been works that focus on the general methodology that Modarressi has used, and that is like trying to critique theology and belief using history. And so now like they're raising the question that to what extent can we use history to critique theology? What are the limits of that? How exactly does that work? So then these are all like methodological discussions. Other books actually, interestingly, have been written to show that, look, the main idea of this book is that Shiite theology as we know it today, before a certain time period, it was not like this. So for example, they say, okay, you know, this belief, let's say for example, this belief in ilm al-ghayb, or the Imams having some kind of special knowledge. If Modarressi's argument is, okay, during the time of the sixth Imam, these Ghulat came and they infiltrated our books, and you know, the Shias, they got this idea that the Imams have special knowledge from the extremists, the Ghulat. So what these books have done, and they've tried to show that, okay, let's take each of these ideas, let's see, before the sixth Imam, can we prove that the Shias believed in this? Can we show, forget like, okay, narrations and books of ahadith, you know, because then you'll say, okay, they're like fabricated, or the Ghulat, whatever. No, just from a historical perspective, the same perspective that Modarressi is using a historical perspective, can we show that these ideas existed before the time of the sixth Imam? So for example, at the time of Imam Ali or Imam Hassan, can we show that the Shias, for example, the way they looked at the Imam, did they look at the Imam as ma'soom? Did they look at the Imam, for example, as having some kind of special knowledge? So these works, for example, would look at that aspect. So just as an example, I recently came across this work. So this is also in Farsi, Ilm Imam Dar Bawar Shi'an Nakhustin. So the ilm of the Imam, the knowledge of the Imam, in light of the views of the earliest companions. So what this book does in the start, he says, look, I'm not taking a hadith perspective. I'm not going to bring for you Al-Kafi and show you, look, you know, Al-Kafi says, for example, all the Imams have this great knowledge. No, I'm not looking at hadith. I'm saying historically, what were the companions believing in? Let's look at history books. And he tries to show that, forget the Shias, even the non-Shias, even the enemies of the Ahlulbayt, the government at that time, even they knew that, okay, these guys, they have some special knowledge. These Imams of theirs, it's not like knowledge like me and you have. So he tries to show that, forget the Shias, even the enemies of the Imams, even they knew that the Imams have kind of special knowledge. No, you want to call that ilm al-ghayb, you want to call that ilm al-ta'wil, you can call it whatever you want. But the main idea is that the way people would look at the Imams, companions, enemies, neutral people, is not as what Modarressi has tried to portray.
Okay, that's actually very interesting. Perhaps, I don't know if somebody could get that translated into English. It would.
Yeah, I mean, it would definitely be helpful for the English speaking audience.
Okay, so now you've sort of touched upon this issue that Modarressi, he brings one proof and he leaves, let's say, there might be 10 counter evidences. And usually in the Hawza, what we do is, well, at least in fiqh, is you have a view, I have a view, it's conflicting. I bring my view, I try to prove it, but I also try to sort of, in an intellectual, respectful way, give a rebuttal. And you're saying that he's not engaging the counter arguments. Is that really the point, or has he come back and said, okay, you know, I'm you know, there's an onslaught, you know, people are coming back and there's, I don't know, 60, 70 books. Has he come back and said, oh, you know, maybe I'm wrong, or what was his reaction?
So, you know, his reaction is very interesting, because before I got into this, you know, my thought was, okay, he'd probably react by saying, no, I don't accept what you're saying, or, you know, like, no, what you're saying is wrong and this is my reading. I thought he would react like that. But then I started to engage with his own responses, and this is the first hand I could see his responses because he's written them in Farsi. And it's very interesting. So there is a book by Rasul Jafri, a famous historian. He's got email exchanges between him and Hossein Modarressi. So that book is published. It's just emails of Hossein Modarressi and Rasul Jafri back and forth. And it's very interesting that when these responses started coming in, Rasul Jafri wrote a letter to Hossein Modarressi and said that, look, you know, your book is created like it's a wildfire over here. So many responses are being written.
Yeah.
And he gave them a website. He said, go to this website. There's a list of like 10 books that they've put over there. You can go and see the responses written. And interestingly, Modarressi was shocked. He was like, what? All these responses? He's like, I was not expecting this to happen. He's like, my purpose in writing this book was not because of what I believe. I don't believe in any of this, by the way. He doesn't believe in any of this.
So Modarressi doesn't believe in this.
No, he doesn't believe any of this.
So did he admit this? Or?
So in fact, in the Farsi translation, at the introduction, he completely says openly that the belief that we have today of the Imams, he has the same exact belief. Okay. He believes and he considers himself as a defender of the wilayah of the Ahlulbayt. He said, I spent my whole life defending the Ahlulbayt.
Okay.
So his belief is probably the same as what you and I have.
Okay.
But he says that what I was trying to do was to write this for a Western academic audience and try and portray a view of Shia history and theology that could be acceptable to people in Western universities. So he is like, I wanted to only portray a version of Shia history and theology that a secular person in a Western academic university can be acceptable to them and that they can interact with Shia theology and history.
Yeah.
So he says, look, that's all my idea was in the book. My book was not to say that this is a book of Shia theology and I believe in all this. No, I'm just trying to present something that they can accept. And he's mentioned this a couple of times. Rasul Jafrian, he's mentioned it to him like twice in that book. And then I mentioned last year there was a new book written in response to Modarressi. Again, that book also, there was a foreword by Ayatollah Milani. Rasul Jafrian sent it to Hossein Modarressi. Again, in response, he repeated the same thing, that look, I did not write this book as a book of theology. This is just something I wrote to present to Western academia. It was for them and them alone.
Yeah.
Interestingly, in one of his letters, he says He's like, I didn't even read many of these responses. He said I had some eye issues, so I didn't read them. But he's like, I don't understand. Why are they like writing so many responses to this book? Have they not forgotten the famous saying that says, Al-batilu yamutu bi tarki dhikrihi? Says, have people forgotten that falsehood will die on its own, a natural death, if you stop talking about it? So he says his book is batil. Like he says, like I don't believe
is
this.
admitting.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's not saying that okay, what I said is correct. He's like, I'm just saying it for the Western academic audience, and he says that if people had not responded, they would have left it. Some few professors in Western academia would have read it, and it would have stayed over there. He's saying that no, the problem is that because of all this response, now you've made it so popular that the effect is that people are being misguided. And initially, in one of his first letters, he's like, I was so shocked then that when Rasul Jafrian told me that people are getting misguided by this book, he's like, I was so shocked that for a while I thought maybe I should write a response to this book using a pseudonym. Yeah. So he said, I thought about it for so long that, I should write a response to this. And he said, for some reason, I thought, no, I don't think I should write a response. But maybe I can push some of my friends to write a response to it.
Yeah.
So perhaps maybe some of the responses that we're seeing in the background, maybe he himself would have told some of the scholars that, write a response to this book. Because again, he's saying that I only wrote this for a Western academic audience. And that's why I wrote this way. And when I was faced with this, for me, it raises a very interesting moral question.
Yeah.
That can you write something like this, which you yourself, you don't believe in, okay, highly problematic content, historically you're choosing things, you're cherry picking, just to please a Western academic audience. Is it morally right, just for the sake of Western academia, you write something like this? It's interesting because the same argument has been brought by some other people before as well. So in the famous case of Abdulaziz Sachedina, his defense was that I just wrote it for Western academia, you're there, this is what you have to write. So for me, it raises two questions. In Hawzawi language, we say kubrawiyan and soghrawiyan. I have a problem with this argument in terms of the major premise and the minor premise. So the major premise that to appease Western academic audience, we must write something that's not true according to us, that plays with historical facts, that plays with theology and narrations. So for me, I'm not really convinced that we have to do that. I feel like that's morally really problematic. And I feel like even if you showed Western academia the responses written to the book, the critiques written, I don't think that any of the critiques are such that a Western secular person would look at it and be like, oh no, this is fanatic, or I can't believe in this. Like everything that's been written is very like academic, it's very ilmi, it's very objective.
Yeah.
We're using like historical works, for example. We're not saying, oh, the Imam couldn't have done this because I believe the Imam is Masoom. No one's responding like that. Everyone is responding using objective historical methods. So it's not that, okay, if you present the true teaching that we believe in, somehow it's not acceptable to Western academia. No, like we're using objective standards. If they don't accept it, then we should like discuss with them like about these standards themselves. Like, what's the problem? We're not like blindly following the Imams that you can say, oh no, we don't believe in that. We're using objective standards. So one is, okay, this whole argument that should we tone down things for Western academia and give them this kind of image.
Yeah.
But the second is also like the specific instance, the way he's done it. I don't think that this does that. Like I still feel that if you would, for example, present a book like this, a book that shows what the initial companions believed about the ilm of the Imam. This book, again, very similar standards, like historical standards only. Like if you gave this to Western academia, I don't see how you can be like looked down upon or can't be accepted. I feel like it's a very like weak argument. But at the end of the day, that's his argument. He says, I just wrote that for Western academia, and I don't believe in any of that.
Okay, that's very interesting. And I think, unfortunately, there were a few things that we've sort of I wanted to cover, but we've run out of time. So I think probably we can sort of reconvene for another day, and inshallah, hopefully this get this argument going further.
Sure.
So thank you so much for tuning in, and I thank the brother for his valuable time. But inshallah, we'll continue the discussion. So please like and subscribe to our channel, Faraj Media English, and also we have another one, Faraj Kids, and hit the bell icon, and do pray for us. And inshallah, if you have any comments, please post them, and inshallah we'll try our best to respond. So wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.